It looked like somebody was bent over and had their head in the window of the deer blind, and it either heard me or smelt me, and he pulled his head out of the tent and stood straight up, and that shocked me. They don't make people that big.
The way it moved, almost as if it was gliding across the beach. I've never seen anything move like that in my life. They were screaming at each other in gibberish. It sounded like a language, and they were chuntering away back and forwards, back and forwards, back and forwards. I know what a bear looks like, and there is no way on this planet that what I saw were bears.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
See ya!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
This is Bigfoot Ed from Black Mountain, North Carolina, and you're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles.
Hey, me and my cousin, she was somewhat of a tomboy. We always like to go in the woods and stuff. And we'd just play around. I don't even remember what we were doing or whatever. And, you know, you got to understand where I'm from. I'm from the Appalachian foothills of Mississippi in Northeast, right up in the Northeast. And we got some really big hills. I wouldn't call them mountains or anything else. But her grandfather, which was my grandfather's brother, had a old store. And it was gravel back then. It was all gravel road that went by. Me and Jenny, so we would run up into the woods, and I don't know what we were doing that day. I don't even remember. It's 1965. But me and Jenny were up there and playing around and stuff on the hillside. It was a real big hill. Wasn't a mountain, but a really big hill. And, you know, we lived from like where we were at was like 2 miles from the Alabama state line and 40 miles from Tennessee state line. But anyway, me and Jenny were up there, and we were just sitting down. There was no logging road. And we just sat down behind some brush, some bushes and everything. And we were just having conversation, you know, and everything. So we heard these footsteps coming down the hill. I mean, it was like, you know, long strides too. And it was coming down the hill. And we looked at each other, and we were just making fun, you know, and everything. We said, wonder what that is. And my cousin, she said, it's probably the Boogerman. You know, back then, back in the 60s, our grandparents told us about the Boogerman. I don't know what it meant, whatever. I think it was, you know, they were trying to scare us about the Boogerman. But she said, probably it's the Boogerman. I looked at her and I said, well, let's sit down here to see. Well, we kept hearing the footsteps coming down the hill. You could hear the crunching of the leaves and everything else. So we crouched down behind these bushes, I guess you'd say, and everything else. And all of a sudden, you couldn't hear the footsteps anymore. And everything got real quiet. You couldn't hear nothing. No, nothing. And then all of a sudden, I looked over to my right, and there were some like 6-foot pine saplings. They were like 6 feet tall alongside the logging road, the old logging road. Okay. And after the footsteps fall, they quit. I looked, and this thing popped out of nowhere. I mean, I don't know how this thing came up without, not knowing. After all the footsteps we heard, it quit, and I kept looking up the hill. Then all of a sudden, it was right there in front of me, and it was when it stepped out, it was a creature, and it had hair. It wasn't fur. It had hair, and it looked like the hair of a orangutan, something like that. So I sat there behind the bushes, and I can't believe this thing came up on us and didn't know we were there. I think because he was walking and, with the leaves under his feet and everything else, he couldn't hear us and everything. But he popped up out of nowhere. And when he popped up, he was behind these pine saplings. And the pine saplings were about 6 feet tall. And these pine saplings hit him right under his elbows. So this creature was like, I know 7 feet tall, could have been 8 feet tall. He had a brow ridge, and everything. This is 1965, okay, Wes? So it blew my mind. I didn't know what I was looking at. I had no idea. I had never heard of Sasquatch or anything like that. But it scared me really bad. And all of a sudden, and I can't believe how stealthy these creatures are, that they don't know when somebody's around. But obviously, he did not know me and my cousin were sitting there behind the bushes. He didn't know. And he was surprised because when my cousin Jenny, she gasped, I guess you would say, and I'm looking at her like, why in the world did you do that? Because now he's going to know where we are. And he turned. He didn't turn like his head or anything. He turned his body. He twisted his body toward us. And he had auburn red hair like an orangutan. And when he looked at me, he looked dead in my eyes. He had eyes like I guess you would say, kind of amber or golden or whatever. I didn't see any white in his eyes or anything else. He looked dead at me when he twisted his body. When he twisted his body, it was incredible. This thing was huge. I mean, his shoulders were like, I guess, 4 feet apart, and you could see the muscle definition. He didn't have a neck. I mean, it's like he just stuffed a dadgum head in the shoulders, and everything. So anyway, when he turned and looked at me and I saw his eyes and everything else, I took off. I ran. You've heard those saying that you could run so fast that you don't feel like your feet are hitting the ground. That's how hard I found. But you know what? After that happened, and whatever thing I've learned about this creature, he could have run me down and killed me in a heartbeat. He could have killed me in a heartbeat. But he didn't. It was the scariest thing I ever seen in my life. So I never talked about this for many years. We ran back down the hill to my great uncle's country store, and we were out of breath and just white in the face. And they're like, "What in the world's wrong with you kids?" I said, "We just saw a gorilla." And they all fell out laughing. So I learned from that day never talk about it again because everybody's going to laugh at me. So later on in life, I think I was in my late 20s, I started talking about this and telling people what I saw. And I'll never forget this. I mean, it changed my life. It did, Wes. It changed my life. And I I will never understand what I saw. But then again, I told you earlier that I saw the Patty film. You know what I'm talking about, 1967, I think, if I'm not wrong. Okay, now 1965 is when this happened. I had no idea what I saw. I didn't know. But when I saw that film of Patty in 1967, I jumped off the couch and I said, that's what I saw right there. That's what I saw. Now, the thing about the one I saw, Wes, was it didn't have a defined features like Patty did. It was more of a rounded head, but had a little bit of a cone on the back. But it was scary. I was 9 years old. I was just a little bitty guy. This thing had red hair. I'm telling you, it was like a auburn red hair. Now, what I know about these creatures now is that they can run you down. They can run a deer down. That thing, if it wanted to hurt me, it could have run me down and killed me if it wanted to.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Why do you think it didn't run you down?
I don't know because when my cousin, she gasped like that, and I was, looking at her like, what the hell did you do that for? Because he had no idea we were there. When he turned around and looked at me, he was like shocked. He was shocked that we were sitting there looking at him. He was only like 15 yards from us.
When he turned around and looked at you, you had mentioned, he kind of had a shocked look on his face, and he did a pretty good job describing the face. What stood out to you the most? And did it remind you more of an animal or more of a human?
Yeah, it looked human. It did. He had a flat nose. He had those golden amber eyes, and his hair, he didn't have fur, he had hair. And his whole face was bare. It was like a dark gray from the top of his head down to under his chin was all hair. But, his front face was all skin. It was like a dark gray. He was scary looking. And by him standing behind the 6-foot pine saplings, they just hit him right under his elbow or whatever. So this guy, and he was a guy because he didn't have no boobs or anything. This guy was like 8 feet tall, between 7 and 8 feet tall. Man, I bolted after that. When he turned to look at, and he didn't turn his head, Wes. He didn't turn his head. He turned he swiveled from his hips. And it looked like he didn't have no neck, nothing. He looked at me, expression on his face. He said it was like he was surprised that these kids saw him looking at him. That was the expression on his face, in his eyes and everything. He was a big one now. He's a big guy. I'm telling you.
I know you may not be able to answer this, but did you get the impression like he was doing something? Or do you think he was just kind of passing through and then your cousin kind of gasps and that kind of ends the whole thing where you guys take off? I mean, what do you think he was doing?
I think that he was passing through. Now that I reflect on everything, I think he was passing through. But when I saw him, when he stepped out, when everything got real silent in the woods, when he stepped out, he was looking down the hill to my great uncle's country store down there, and it was all gravel road back then. And he could hear cars pulling up and everything else, And this one of these country stores in Mississippi where everybody would get a Coca-Cola case and sit on it and eat sardines and hoop cheese and everything else. But he was looking. He was looking down the hill down there at people pulling up and car doors slamming and everything else. He didn't even know we were there. He had no idea me and my cousin were sitting there behind the bushes. But when she gasped like that, I looked at her like, what in the hell did you do that for? He he had a surprised look on his face, and he looked human, Wes. He looked human in his face. He had a big nose, flat nose, had a big mouth, and he had that red hair or auburn hair or whatever. And he was like, I'm telling you, I think he was like close to 8 feet tall. I'm telling you. His shoulders, when he turned, it was like 4 feet wide. You could see the muscles. I mean, it was incredible, but I bolted.
Yeah, I could understand you bolting. I think I would have too. And it's really hard to comprehend, I think, for a lot of people, something 7.5, 8 feet tall, 4 feet wide in the shoulders. I mean, you're looking at a giant. And so I don't blame you. I would have ran too. Did you and your cousin ever talk about this after the encounter?
No, she won't talk about it, Wes. She won't talk about it. I've told her daughter and her grandchildren about the episode we had and everything, and she won't even talk about it. To this day, I don't think she ever went back in the woods again. I did. I hunted all the time. I just put it back in my mind. But she won't even talk about it now. She saw the same thing I saw.
Yeah, which is understandable. Everyone deals with an encounter differently, and some people do shut down. I don't know if it's their way of coping with it or, but I get it, after seeing something like that. Did any of your family ever see the creature? I mean, they had mentioned to you, watch out for the Boogerman, and this is 1965. I mean, did anyone else in the family see this creature?
Well, okay, let me tell you this. About 2 weeks after this sighting that I saw when I was 9 years old, I always loved to go to Fremont and stay with my grandparents. And I was asleep, and my grandmother woke me up, and she said, come out here, I want you to hear something. So we went outside, and this is like 3 miles from the sighting I had when I was 9 years old. And there was the most god-awful screeches in the woods you have ever seen in your life. Now, let me tell you, Wes, I know the woods, and I know when I hear a bobcat, I know when I hear this and that, whatever, but this was nothing like I've ever heard in my life. And this was like 3 miles from where I saw my sighting when I was 9 years old. And this was a couple of weeks later. And I mean, it was a scream like a crazy person. This was no bobcat or anything else. And I asked I said, Grandmother, what is that? And she said, oh, it's just a panther. It's a cougar. Oh, we don't have panthers and cougars in Mississippi. And it wasn't no dadgum bobcat. I'm going to tell you that right now. It was the most terrifying scream you ever heard in your life. Anyway, want to add this to it also. In Mississippi back in the 60s, now you got to understand where this is. It's 2 miles. Where I was at is 2 miles from Alabama state line. Okay. And 40 miles from Tennessee. And we in the Appalachian foothills. And people back then, I mean, this is rural. I mean, this in the middle of nowhere. We didn't have garbage service, so everybody got a backhoe and dig a pit for a garbage, disposal, a big pit, and then throw all the garbage and then burn it and everything else. So anyway, right after my sighting, there were rumors going around that they saw monkeys in their damn garbage pit. And that was crazy. They said they saw monkey-like creatures in their garbage pit outside their house. And that's where everybody threw their garbage in. That, I reflect on everything now, and I look back on it, and I have for years, and I didn't talk about it for years. To my remembrance, I don't even remember. I don't even think I told my parents what I saw. I told my sisters, but I don't even think I told my parents. But when I got in my late 20s, that's when I started talking about it, And now I don't even care if people make fun of me. I know what I saw, and I'll take it to my grave.
That's kind of interesting that people were saying they were seeing monkeys in the garbage pit. It makes you wonder if they were around there more than what you guys thought. And, I know a lot of your questions would be my same questions. Any major predator, you start running and they're probably going to chase you. And that's the weird part about Sasquatch is it doesn't, especially a little kid, easy prey, easy to run down. You just don't hear of them doing that. You'll hear a lot of other behavior of them throwing stuff and roaring and screaming at you. And, I think a lot of that is meant to make you go away. But you'll notice when people say they take off running, rarely does a creature actually, it might follow you, but it's not trying to chase you down. And it's an amazing account getting that close to this creature to get such a good look at this thing. I want to ask you about this haunted home that you grew up in. Before we get to that, 60 years later, what do you think these creatures are? Because you got a really close look at one of these things.
Yeah, I was. I was like 15 yards from him. And to tell you what he is, I have no idea. I don't know. I think the more we learn, the less we know. I think they're like us. I think there's good ones and bad ones. I don't know. It's just like the one I saw was huge, huge. And the one I saw was a male. I can tell you that because I didn't see any boobs on him or anything, when he twisted his body and looked at me. But it changed my life. And then when I saw the Patterson Gimlin film, I said, that's what I saw right there. And I have done research and listened to stuff, and I listened to your podcast and everything else. And I thank God for your podcast because you have gave us an opportunity to tell our story and not be laughed at. So anyway, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know. I've had people that laughed at me and said, how come he wasn't on Noah's Ark? I said, well, how you know he wasn't? But, I don't know where this creature came from. I have no idea. And the more we learn about it, the less we know. That's all I can tell you, Wes.
Yeah, and I think that's a fair answer, Wayne. It really is an amazing subject because when you talk to some eyewitnesses, they'll say it looked more like an animal, more like a non-human primate. And then other witnesses you talk to, they'll say, what I saw looked very human-like. It was hairy, but it looked very human-like. And it does make you wonder what they are.
When I saw his face, Wes, he looked human, but he was huge. Like some of the biggest athletes in the world couldn't stand up to this guy. He was huge.
Yeah. With the size of them, you would think we'd be tripping over them in the forest. Tell me about the haunted home that you lived in.
I grew up in a house on the hill in right by the square in Fulton, Mississippi. They call it the haunted house on the hill. I could sit here on the phone. You don't have enough time for what I could tell you about this house. But now, when my mom died about 10 years ago, me and my sister sold the house. And there's a beauty salon right across the street from the house, and they've seen the girl standing in the window. She's a teenage girl, and I've seen her. My niece has seen her, and my youngest sister has seen her. And it's a 3-story home. My room was upstairs. I saw her in my room one night. Let me back up a little bit. Now, when my mom was dying of cancer, we were taking care of her in the house. She got really disturbed because she was seeing stuff. Pictures were flying off the walls and stuff like that. And we had a priest, or not a priest, but it was a Presbyterian preacher or whatever. He came in with the holy water and everything else because my mom was not scared of nothing. She knew something was in that house. We all knew, but it never stopped. My niece was going to Mississippi State, and she was doing a project in the breakfast room, what we call the breakfast room. She was doing her work for Mississippi State. And my sister she took her turn to take care of Ma. She was in the bedroom, almost asleep, and she heard my niece scream. And so she went in there and said, "Honey, what's wrong?" She goes, "I saw her." She said, "Who?" She said, I saw the girl. And she was standing in the living room or the dining room staring at her in there. Now, let me back up. She left in the breakfast room. She had all these artworks and everything else in there. And when she came back in, everything was misplaced. So all of a sudden, she turned around. She saw this girl staring at her, and she screamed. And my sister said what she looked like. She said it's like a 16-year-old girl, and it wasn't an apparition. It was like a full body. She said she had Victorian clothing on, from the Victorian age, and and everybody knows that house in Fulton, Mississippi. Everybody calls it the haunted house on the hill, and it's a beautiful home. Everybody knows. I mean, it likes company too. Every time we had company there, it would, mess with everybody and stuff. It's not just my family. It's everybody that visited the home. They had experiences in there.
So it's kind of a young girl. She's about 16 and appears in a Victorian dress. Is that the only apparition? Well, I guess she's not an apparition. You're saying it's full body. Was that the only ghost people were seeing? Was this girl?
Yeah, it's the young girl. Yeah. See, before that big house on the hill was built, there was a school there for girls. I don't think the house is haunted. I think the property that it's on is haunted because there was a school there before for girls before that house was built there. And I think that's what it is. I think this is a girl. And I've seen her, and she's a pretty girl. She has dark hair, about shoulder length hair, and everything else. And it's I think it's she's from the school that was there before the house was built there.
I hear you. And so, when you guys very first moved in, did it start off right away?
Yeah, it didn't take long. It didn't take long at all. And my room was upstairs, and I could hear people walking upstairs. The French doors in the dining room would open and close. It was just crazy stuff, And I got to a point to where it didn't even bother me anymore. And I think this girl, she liked me because I think when I started having these experiences with her, I was about 16 years old. And I think that from what I've seen of her, she's about that age also. She liked me. She always messed with me all the time. I mean, she'd walk in, I could hear her walk in my room at night, open and close my double door closet on the end of the room. She'd appear in front of people if she wanted to. And people, my friends and everything have been in that house and heard and seen stuff, and they're like, they'll freak out. They freak out. And I always tell them, don't freak out. He's not going to bother you, And there's a beauty salon right across the street from my family home, and they have seen her standing in the window. But I saw her several times, and every time it was just like a glimpse. And she had passed by a door or what. I'd go by and visit my mom. She's been dead like 10 years now. Both my parents are gone. And I would look up from the kitchen table and I'd see her pass by the dining room door. And she was a full body figure. There was no apparition, no nothing. And I said, "Ma, I just saw her." He said, "Yeah, I saw her the other day too." But she always has that same dress on, that period dress from like Victoria's age and everything.
Yeah, it almost kind of sounds like poltergeist type behavior. she would come in your room, open doors, open different things in the home. And like I said, it kind of sounds like poltergeist behavior. Did she ever throw stuff across the room?
Yeah, when Ma was dying of cancer, we took care of her in the house, and pictures was off the wall and break on the floor and stuff like that. It got really bad. It got really bad. I think it knew when Ma died that we were going to sell the house, me and the sisters, and so it got really bad, really bad. And look, I took a family in there, which the family I'm at right now. Right now, I'm at their house. I took them in there. They wanted to see the house before we sold it. We were having a estate sale, and some stuff happened. It was scary, and the kids started crying and everything else, and there was like a china cabinet opened on its own, and they really got scared. It was bad, And of course, I had told them. I said, "Now, this house is haunted. I'm telling you." And when they saw all the stuff that they saw that night, they left that house knowing that we weren't lying. It was the truth.
Have you ever gone back to the home?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I've been there. I sold it to a realtor. He flipped the house. It's really nice. And it's like a venue now. Everybody has weddings there and everything else, And I know a couple that got married in there, and they stayed upstairs. And I told them, I knew them. And I said, now, if something happens, don't be surprised. Now, I'm telling you. They didn't think anything about it. So the husband of the couple, he told me the morning they woke up that he kept hearing somebody talking, a conversation downstairs or whatever, and couldn't figure out where it was and everything else. And I told him that when he went there, I said, you're going to hear people talking. And he did. He did. He heard that morning that people were talking. He couldn't figure out where it's coming from. And so, I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah, so the activity is definitely still going on. Everyone kind of has their own different opinions on ghosts. Do you think that she was something evil, kind of presenting herself as a 16-year-old kid?
I don't think she's evil. I really don't. I don't know what to say, Wes. At first we were afraid and scared, but not anymore, But you have to be careful with this kind of stuff too, because, there's a difference between a ghost and a demon. And I really don't think she's a demon at all. I think she liked my family. She's still there. I know for a fact.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I can kind of understand what you mean. When people have Sasquatch on their property, things get to be so weird that it becomes normal because it goes on so much. And I would imagine the same thing happens like in a home where you have a haunting like this. I wanted to ask you, how would you define the difference between a ghost and a demon?
Well, I think a ghost is somebody that's lost. They need to pass over. Now, a demon, that's a different whole story right there. But you got to be careful about the one of the two. I'm not afraid of ghosts. I'm not afraid of it at all. I could walk into a dark home or a church or whatever, and it don't even bother me. But you got to be careful about demons.
Yeah, I guess in my mind, I'm not so sure that they're different from one from the other. And, if there's lost souls, that means that God's kind of a temporary worker with a piss poor attitude. You know what I mean? Like, well, why is this person lost? Why is this soul lost? And, but that's my opinion, and it doesn't mean that I'm right by any means, but it is fascinating. I really appreciate sharing it, especially her not being see-through, her being like a full body apparition. Makes you wonder why some ghosts will appear kind of in a see-through or not seen at all, but stuff will fly through the room, different objects, and then other times when people see it, it looks like a person standing in front of them. Again, I really appreciate you sharing it, Wayne, and I appreciate going back to 1965 and sharing that Sasquatch encounter with us. I really enjoyed having you on. Thank you again.
Well, thank you, Wes. I appreciate you, and keep doing what you're doing, brother. You're doing a good job. You give us a...
Okay,
well, like I say, my encounter, it was kind of brief. Like it's nothing compared to the others I've heard on your show. But I drove a route delivering truck accessories, and I went all through the state of Mississippi and down into Louisiana. I go to Shreveport and North Mississippi, just depending on the day. And I have to leave the warehouse 2:30, 3 o'clock every morning. So I would get up and leave my house around 1 every morning to get to work. And I just left the house, and I must have been doing maybe 65. And it's probably 1:30 in the morning. And it's just like time just stood still for like a split second. I'd never seen this thing run in front of me. I'd never seen it run out from in front of the truck. It just appeared in front of me, and for a second, everything just stopped. And it was pure white, and the tail looked like, you hear people talk about an alligator can beat you to death with his tail. Well, this thing looked like he could put a hurting on you with his tail. It had its mouth kind of open, like it was gasping for air, trying like it was running really fast, and it was just huffing and puffing. And it didn't have long hair, and it didn't have short hair. It was just like, it's like a German Shepherd maybe. And I have a Ford F-150, and it's got a 3-inch lift on it, and the hood comes up to probably where my rib cage starts, maybe a little higher. And I could see this thing was probably 2 foot in front of my truck, and I could see from middle ways its belly all the way up above the hood of my truck. So if it's standing there, I'm saying the top of his head probably came to my chin. If it would have been just standing up, just standing there. I have no idea what it was. Like I say, it just lasted for a second, but it was ginormous. It must have been 5 foot tall, standing on all fours, and probably 200 to 300 pounds. And I mean, that's really basically about it. I know it's kind of short and not very interesting, but I've always wondered what that was. Was I hallucinating, or did I actually see something?
Yeah, I don't think you were hallucinating. I mean, that's a weird thing to hallucinate, especially since you're heading to work, and tell me more about the tail. Was it like a dog's tail?
It was like a dog's tail, but it looked like it was probably the bigger end of a baseball bat. It was probably about that big around, and it was long, but it wasn't abnormally long compared to its body. This thing from the tip of its nose to the tip of its tail covered an entire lane of the highway. And down here, our highways are 16 feet wide. So this thing was 14 to 16 feet long.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was running on all fours, or if it may have been hunched over and running on its hind legs. I don't know. I couldn't see down that far. But the tail it looked very muscular, like just a big muscle.
Yeah, that thing sounds huge. I mean, were you able to get a look at the face at all?
I saw the profile and the snout. It was kind of long, but not really long. It looked like it was just kind of like it was pointy, like a pointy snout. And the ears were sticking up, like somebody cropped his ears. They were sticking up, but they weren't ginormous. They were, they fit his body, which I say his body was pretty big. So, and the mouth, like I say, the mouth was open a little bit, like it was gasping for wind from running. And it was probably doing, I don't know how fast it was running, but I was doing 65, and it just appeared in front of my truck, and the next second it was gone.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking canine, especially after you and I spoke yesterday. and kind of reading your email, kind of weird about it appearing and then it's gone. You had sent me a picture of something that was similar to what you saw. And I'll post it underneath this episode. How similar is this picture to what you actually saw?
The head and the way the mouth is open is pretty much spot on, but this thing doesn't look, it looks like it might be maybe a brown or a dark color or something like that. And the hair on this thing is stringy looking. The thing I saw did not have stringy look. It looked like it was groomed, well groomed. But the head and the way the mouth is open on the picture I sent you is pretty much spot on.
And I know this is December, and you're describing this white creature. Was it snowing out when this happened?
No, it was cold, but it wasn't snowing. No, I mean the weather was clear, but it was cold that morning. Probably about 3 weeks before Christmas. It was first week or two of December.
Do you think that it happened so quick that you weren't paying attention on it kind of coming in front of the truck? It's kind of weird though. You didn't see it come out from the other side as it was going across.
No, it was just there. And then next thing, like you blink and it's gone. And I started to turn around and go back and just shine my headlights across the field. But then I thought, by the time I get turned around and go back, it's gonna be gone. I wish I'd went back and at least looked for some footprints or tracks or something, but I just kept going.
And you had just kind of jumped in the truck and headed off to work. How far away from your home did this happen?
Probably 4 miles, 5 miles. Like I told you yesterday, I've heard you talk about MK Davis on your show quite a bit. And he and I actually live in the same area. And I reached out to him because he posted something on Facebook about what somebody had caught on their game cam. And it kind of resembled it. I'm thinking about reaching out to him again and just talking to him, see if we and him can't sit down and just talk about stuff. Because like I say, it was it was directly in front of the truck when I saw it. I mean, it was right there. It was 2, maybe 3 feet in front of the truck. And like I say, I just saw the top half of his body. I couldn't see his legs. I saw the shoulders, but I couldn't even tell if the shoulders were moving, like in a running motion or not. It was there and then it was gone.
Like you and I were talking yesterday, I mean, it sounds like a dog man. It sounds like a big one, and they generally are pretty big, but this one just sounds huge. It's weird how it just kind of appeared. I would imagine being 4 miles away from your home, you've probably driven back to this area several times.
I have not. I've driven by there 100 times since then, just traveling, but I've never stopped to actually get out and look. Matter of fact, I'm out and about today. I'm thinking about maybe just kind of slowing down and taking a look around and see if I can see something. I don't know, but like I say, it was 2 years ago, so I don't know if it was just passing through and not even around anymore. I have no idea. And I've written that email out to you, I don't know how many times, and just never sent it until the other night I was listening to your show. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go ahead and send this email. I said, somebody might know something because I have no idea. And any input I can get from anybody is more than welcome. I remember hitting the brakes because it was there. I remember hitting the brakes thinking, oh, goodness, I'm fixing to tear this truck up. And I've heard your show and I've heard people talk about they don't think that they would have a gun big enough to take something like that down, a Bigfoot or a dog man. I got to tell you, the way this thing looked, I wouldn't want to shoot it with a 22, but a 300 Magnum with a well-placed shot, I think would take it down. But I don't know for sure. Like I say, I've never seen anything before like this. I don't know. But I wouldn't want to be in the woods with a 22 if this thing came up.
Yeah, it amazes me because Dogman does the same behavior as Sasquatch, almost to a T in a situation like this. You'll often hear where Sasquatch will cross right in front of cars. Dogman seems to do the same thing. And I mean, this one sounds huge. I know they're big. Sometimes people talk about them having the wide shoulders and then kind of tapered down into the waist.
No, this thing was the same size from the shoulder to the butt. I mean, it didn't skinny down. It was the same like just a big girth of bigness. I don't know if it was muscular. Like I said, I just seen it for a half a second and just the top half of his body. But if this thing was standing on all fours, and a dog will hear like a noise outside and he'll stand up and kind of bow up at whatever it is. If it was standing like that, it would have came up to my chin. I'm 6'2", 6'3". The top of his head would have came up to my chin.
Yeah, I've never seen a dog man, but I've taken many reports, and I'm more than convinced that this thing is out there running around. And I don't know if that's what you saw, but it sounds like one. It just sounds like it's built like a refrigerator. Did you get the feeling like this thing was a natural animal? I mean, what do you think Dogman is?
I think it is an animal. I don't think it's nothing but, blood animal. But it's something maybe that is out there we haven't discovered. Well, it's been discovered because there's so many sightings. There's got to be something out there because hundreds of years of reports of stuff. But I think it's flesh and blood, and I wouldn't want to encounter it in the woods if I was out there. That's all I can say about that. Unless I was heavily armed. It's still heavily armed. You know, that's just something you don't want to see.
Yeah, I agree with you. Even armed to the teeth, I don't know that I'd want to run into one. And that game cam, you'd mentioned that earlier about MK Davis's game cam. Was it the same thing that you saw on that game cam?
It kind of struck. It kind of did, but this thing looks feeble and skinny. Well, in his game cam, what I saw was massive. I mean, it was just thick. It looked like it was king of the area. Don't let your dogs out if they're thinking you got a big bad dog, because this thing's going to hurt his feelings.
Yeah, and I know that you're a member, and this really wasn't a Bigfoot encounter. But I figured I would ask you, Troy, what do you think Sasquatch is?
I would love to actually see one. I would love that. But I think it's all just flesh and blood. I don't think it's the alien. I think they're flesh and blood, and they may be big enough to where if you shot one, it's not going to take it down. But I've seen what a 300 Magnum can do to an animal. And I got to say, if you hit one just right, you can take it down. But I think it's just flesh and blood. I think dog men are just some kind of creature that's out there. And I think the Bigfoot is just some kind of creature that's out there as well.
Could be. Was this the weirdest thing you've ever seen in your life?
Well, recently, back when I was right out of high school, I had a job working at a catfish processing plant. And I worked weekends, Saturday and Sunday. I worked from 8 in the morning till midnight on Saturday. And then I would go back Sunday morning, 8 to midnight. I worked there probably 3 years. Well, for about the first 6 months or 8 months, everything was fine. And the driveway by the little guard shack that I parked next to was probably 30, 40 yards long. Well, one night when I left, I pulled out of the driveway onto the road in front of the plant. And I got this overwhelming feeling that somebody was watching me. And that happened every night for about 4 months or 5 months. When I would leave there, the same place, I would get this feeling. And I actually one night stopped the truck and got out and looked in the bed thinking one of my buddies is, messing with me. Nobody was there. And I pinpointed a spot down the road 4 or 5 miles. It's an old warehouse. It's not, and it's abandoned now. The feeling would leave me when I would go by that warehouse. Well, one night when I left, I got in the truck and I'm fiddling with the radio, and out of the corner of my eye, I saw something sitting in the passenger side seat of the truck. And it was a greenish color. It wasn't illuminating any light, but I could tell it was green. And it had its legs crossed and had its left arm sitting on the back of the seat staring at me. And the head was kind of like, the symbol for the poison, the crossbones in the skull. That's the type head it had. And it was smiling because I could see through I never made eye contact with it, but I could see it out of the corner of my eye. And it had on, and then when I tell everybody this, they kind of roll their eyes and think, man, I want some of that stuff you were smoking that night. But it had on an Abraham Lincoln top hat. And when I remember seeing it, I'm thinking, I don't know what am I seeing things? I was scared to actually look over. And then when I went by that warehouse, I was probably 3 or 4 miles. I'd forgotten about the warehouse, the feeling that would leave then. After about 3 or 4 miles, I got past it. I thought about it, and I kind of cut my eyes over. It was gone. So I turned my head and looked, and it was gone. And it never happened again after that night. I never had any kind of weird feeling about anybody watching me when I would leave. Nothing ever happened after that night. I worked there probably another year and a half after that. But when I passed that warehouse, whatever was in that truck got out.
Yeah, that's really creepy. And it was sitting in the passenger seat?
Yeah, it was in I had a single cab Chevrolet Silverado, and it was sitting in the passenger seat and had his leg crossed and had his left arm over the back seat of the truck, staring at me, smiling. And like I say, the skin looked like it was like an old 70s or 80s baby doll, like the plastic kind of looking skin, but it was green.
What's your theory on why that happened? I mean, was there stuff going on at the plant?
I had heard people talk about seeing things at that place. I'd never seen anything or experienced anything there, but I had heard about the guards before. Nobody would be in the plant. They would go through doing their rounds. And then a couple hours later, they go back through doing more rounds. There'd be like a knife sticking out of a box that wasn't there before. Or my cousin worked there, and she was still the same job that I had taken over for. And she said she was standing looking out the window one night into the warehouse towards the plant. And she saw something standing in the window like it was smoking a cigarette. Like the cherry of the cigarette, like they would take a puff and it would glow. Like someone was standing there smoking a cigarette and nobody else was around.
Yeah, the whole thing is creepy. I wonder why, when you drove past that abandoned warehouse, that feeling of being watched went away, and even this thing in the truck vanished as you were going by. Wonder what it was about that abandoned warehouse.
I don't know. The best I can think of is maybe that's where somebody used to work there or something. I don't know. I mean, it's been like I say, this was back in the early 90s, and that warehouse had been there since I don't know how long, but it was closed down and abandoned then and kind of run down. So it may have been like a place that something had happened and somebody was just traveling back. Because there was the warehouse that was abandoned was a fish feed warehouse. So with that being a fish feed warehouse, this being a catfish plant, that might have something to do with it. Might link them together.
I wonder why it chose this one night to kind of appear, because you were having that feeling of being watched. There was no other nights where this thing actually appeared. This was the only night.
No, that one night is the only night. Because I actually got out and looked in the back of the truck, in the bed of the truck, thinking somebody's in the bed of my truck, and nobody was around.
When this thing was in the truck, do you think it was just fear? That's why you didn't look over? I mean, I don't think I'd look over at it either, but do you think it was just fear?
I don't know if it was fear or if it was just I didn't want to acknowledge it. Because I've always heard if you hear something or see something, you acknowledge it, you're inviting it in. And I just don't know if I didn't want to acknowledge it was there, if I just want to ignore it. I don't know. It freaked me out a lot, though. It was weird. So it might have been some fear in there. But being 18 years old, what are you scared of,
Yeah, like I said, I don't think I would have looked over either. I think I would have just kept driving and hoping for the best. Sometimes I'll ask people about ghosts and if they think that they're people, but this thing didn't even really look like a person.
No, it didn't. It did not look human at all. The only thing that was human about it was the arms and legs. I mean, the head was like a skull-shaped head, but it was green, and I could tell it was green, even though it didn't illuminate any light. I could tell it was green. Like it was like it's about the same color as that old TV show, The Incredible Hulk, when he would turn green. It was about that color, like that.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, that's creepy. That's almost more creepy than the thing that jumped in front of your truck. But I really appreciate sharing it, and I really appreciate you